Monkey Island 2 continued the adventures of Guybrush Threepwood, now a fully fledged pirate and on a quest to find the legendary treasure of Big Whoop. Like the first game, it was a point-and-click adventure game created and designed by Ron Gilbert, working closely with Double Fine founder Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman, who would later go on to work at Telltale Games. Prior to The Secret of Monkey Island, Gilbert had honed his craft as a writer on Zack McCracken and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, as well as being one of the creators of the SCUM system itself for Maniac Mansion. His involvement in the subsequent Monkey Island sequels was to be simply credited as creator, but his work since those days has been memorable too. Firstly, there's the Deathspank trilogy, released on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network between 2010 and 2011. These paired the writer's trademark humour with a more Diablo style of gameplay. Then there was The Cave from 2013, a personal favourite of mine, which saw Gilbert working closely once more with Tim Schafer at Double Fine to produce a dark, humorous platform puzzle game. His most recent work was Thimbleweed Park, released in 2017, which was a mostly successful attempt to recapture the style of Maniac Mansion. Sadly, LucasArts would only release one more graphic adventure on the Amiga, 1993's Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which I still maintain should have been the basis of the fourth movie. They instead concentrated on the PC market and continued to produce classics such as Sam & Max, Full Throttle and Day of the Tentacle. Now let's find out what my original review had to say. Issue 35 of Games X featured the exclusive, first published review of Monkey Island 2 anywhere in the UK, meaning that I was one of the first people outside of LucasArts and publisher US Gold to actually play it. The game's artwork featured on the front cover of the issue, and my review was across a 2-page spread. I remember that I had begged to be allowed to be the one to review the game, after having been such a big fan of the first one. I awarded it the maximum 5 X's out of 5, with an X-rated Game of the Week stamp. Gameplay, lastability and presentation all received 19 out of 20. These were the highest scores that I gave in my entire time on Games X. I applauded LucasArts for how they'd managed to top the first game in almost every regard. Graphics, music, story, puzzles and of course jokes were all better. The lack of insult sword fighting was disappointing, but the inclusion of things such as a pirate spitting contest more than made up for it. The Amiga version of Monkey Island 2 came on a whopping 11 discs, which was a massive step up from the 4 of the first game. Although you could install it to a hard drive, I didn't have one and I didn't know anybody who did. Consequently, disc swapping was a major issue for some players, although thankfully the development team had clearly thought about it and it was nowhere near as some games in this regard. LucasArts have done it again. LeChuck's Revenge is the best adventure game I've played anywhere. Game of the Year 1992. Bear in mind that last statement was made in an issue that came out in the first week of January. Let's see if it's still the case. Let's start with the screen that first appears when you first load it up. Monkey Island 2 actually gives you a choice between a full fat version or what it refers to here as Monkey 2 Lite. This was actually referred to on the back of the box in a very polite manner as an optional easy mode for beginners and magazine reviewers. Now, it's a very brave developer that actively insults the very people who are going to be critiquing their work. Now, the music in this game is actually very sparse, which is a bit of a shame, because what music there is very, very good. And so here is the game's first antagonist, which is Largo Legrand. As with any sequel, you're always a little bit apprehensive as to whether or not the game is going to be as good as the original was. And the moment at which I worked out that I was in good hands and this game was going to be as good as the first was when you talk to this woodsmith here. And the fact that you get to have this conversation asking how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood, which in itself is a very humorous question, but it's all the different responses that you get. A woodchuck could chuck no amount of wood, since a woodchuck can't chuck wood. But if a woodchuck could chuck wood and would chuck some amount of wood, what amount of wood would a woodchuck chuck? But this interaction with the woodsmith is actually completely irrelevant to the plot, or at least it is at this point. So I'm going to run through all this quite quickly. The next thing that I need to get is the monocle and some paper from the cartographer. So there's some paper down here. If I pick up paper, then you need to wait by the table here, because the cartographer, as you can see, will put down his monocle from time to time. And when he does, you need to steal it. And then leave. One of the great ways that they use the scum system is that you can actually, when you hover over an item or a character, it will highlight something that you can instantly access by pressing the right mouse button, rather than have to work out what the best thing to press is. As before, Guybrush's boundless enthusiasm makes him a very easy character to root for, even in the face of the fact that practically every other character in the game insults him in some way. Now, I am actually playing this on the A500 Mini, and the advantage of doing this using the WHD load file is that I have actually completely obliterated all of the loading pauses and disk swapping. So now what I need to do here on Scab Island is I need to go to the swamp. And if you look at the gravestones, they will tell you who's buried here. The good news is he's dead. The bad news is he bred. Right, so that's Largo's great uncle, or I think his grandfather. So if I use the shovel on that grave, so it is possible to play through and finish this game in a relatively short amount of time. But I would strongly encourage you, if you've never played this game before, to try and interact with as much as you can and talk to as many people as you can, because some of the because you'll be missing out on some fantastic dialogue if you do skip it the way that I'm doing here. There are better ways to play this game these days with the arrival of the talkie edition on the PC for starters, and then the special edition that came out on consoles and PC much later on. They have some fantastic voice work throughout, but I think there's part of the joy of playing these games back in the day was the fact that as you read the dialogue, you would have a voice in your head for each character. This is one of the few games in the world that has actually made me laugh out loud more than once. Back when I played it originally, a few of the jokes a lot of the jokes are genuinely funny, and it's impossible to play through this game without smiling while doing so. So here we go. All the work that we've been doing has led to this. Use pins in Voodoo Doll. There we go. So the only thing left to do is to charter a ship and get off the island, and then that's the end of part 1. Like I say, I've played through this very quickly because I've played this game that many times that I can still remember what to do with all these puzzles. But the first time I played this, that was a good 6 hours of gameplay to get to do all this bit. Walking around talking to everybody, trying to solve all the puzzles. But it wasn't 6 hours of frustration, it was 6 hours of pure joy. And for me, this still remains the adventure game by which all other LucasArts games are measured. Very definitely the peak of the Monkey Island series. It was all downhill from here. That's not to say that the other games were rubbish. It's just that's how good this game was. Monkey Island 2 remains, to this day, one of my top 10 games of all time, so it's no surprise that I really enjoyed playing it again. We've seen plenty of hilarious games released over the years, from Portal 2 to South Park, but Monkey Island 2 remains the gold standard for how to do comedy in gaming. In the adventure genre alone, its influence is everywhere. I very much doubt games such as Discworld, Simon the Sorcerer and the Book of Unwritten Tales would exist without it. Due to only allowing 32 colours on screen, the Amiga version is a little lacking in the visual department, especially compared to the 256 colour PC version. Fortunately, the artists have done a decent job of making sure that the backgrounds and animation are still great. The presentation is the one area where the game hasn't aged the best, but the fact that there is genuine artistry behind the visuals definitely helps. I still found solving the puzzles to be an absolute joy. Over the years, I've seen some people criticise it for being a little bit too obscure, but I've honestly never found that to be the case. When I originally reviewed it, I played and finished the game over one long weekend without any hints. No need to use that easier mode for magazine reviewers. It would easily get 9 out of 10 if I reviewed it today, maybe even a perfect 10. For me, it's easily the best game that was released in 1992, mainly because the PAL version of Super Mario Kart didn't come out until 1993. Primarily known for their platform games such as Chuck Rock and Rick Dangerous, Core Design got more ambitious with their output in 1991. Firstly, they took on the flight sim genre with great success with Thunderhawk, and they followed this up with the arcade racing game Jaguar XJ220 in early 1992. This was the recipient of a whopping 98% in its review in the pages of Amiga Action, a review score which went down in infamy, but that's a story for another time. Game designer Robert Toon, veteran of many a Core title, then came up with the idea of a game set in a fantasy world where you played the role of a modern kid trying to get home. Titled Zaloria, it was originally envisioned as an isometric 3D adventure, similar to the 8th Days Heimdall which Core had published in 1991. Eventually, it was decided that a graphical adventure in the style of something from LucasArts or Sierra would suit the game more, and subsequently the game's title was changed to Curse of Enchantia. Both Toon and fellow designer Ian Sabine were of the opinion that too much text on screen was something that slowed down many games in the genre, so a decision was made that this one would feature none at all. Instead, all of the game's storytelling and humour would have to come through in the art and animation. All of the game's atmospheric backgrounds, which were inspired by Sierra's King's Quest series, were the work of artist Rolf Moore, who also provided the game's cover art. Moore's impressive gaming CV would go on to include the likes of Ratchet & Clank and Epic Mickey, working for developers such as Sony Computer Entertainment, Insomniac, Telltale Games, and Bethesda. He currently works as a lead concept artist for the Walt Disney Company, and worked alongside the developers of both Tron Identity and Aliens Dark Descent. For the game's animation, they turned to Billy Allison, who was working in TV at the time, and his impressive cartoon styles would also go on to be included in Bubba and Sticks, Blob and Wonder Dog. He was aided by newcomer Stuart Atkinson, who would go on to work at Core for many years, working on games such as BC Racers, Project Eden and the Tomb Raider series. Enchantia sold well enough for a sequel, and although the work started on one, the development team would instead go on to make another point-and-click adventure game called Universe. As the title suggests, this swapped out the fantasy setting for a more science fiction one, although it did use the same icon-driven interface. Reviews were good, especially for the CD32 version, but it would still end up being the last adventure game developed by Core themselves. Core were one of the most prolific developers and publishers for the Amiga, and they would continue making games right up until 1995, with their final game being the isometric shooter Skeleton Crew. They turned their attention to consoles, and specifically the newly released Sony PlayStation, with both Shellshock and Firestorm Thunderhawk 2 being early successes for the console. They were bought out by another UK-based developer and publisher, Rebellion, in 2006, who are probably most well known for the Sniper Elite series. The final game developed by Core Design themselves was extreme sports game Free Running, released for the PlayStation Portable. Now it's time to go back 31 years, yes, it really has been that long, and check out my original review for Curse of Enchantia. Curse of Enchantia was one of 7 games that I reviewed in Amiga Action Issue 38 from November 1992. 2 of those other games, Pinball Fantasies and the Aquatic Games, are ones that I've already covered on the re-review in previous episodes, and there's going to be another one coming up very soon. I'd gotten to preview Enchantia a couple of issues earlier, and I was really looking forward to playing the finished product. With a score of 94% and a review that stretched across 3 pages, it's safe to say that I wasn't disappointed. Here's how my score compares to those in the other big Amiga magazines of the time. I stated that the game's lack of text actually worked quite well, and would probably make the game appeal to a wider audience than most other Amiga adventure games. I also liked the inclusion of a joystick control option, which made certain sections of the game a lot less fiddly to navigate, and it was actually my preferred control method. I also liked the lack of disc swapping, which is something that ruined a lot of adventure games, even Monkey Island 2. The game came on 7 discs, but you could actually play through large sections of the game without having to take a disc out of the drive at all. My biggest praise though was saved for the game's graphics. The graphics are tremendous. All of the backgrounds began life as real paintings on canvas, and are very atmospheric and look sensational. Now let's see how well the game stands up today. It's time for the playtest. So here we go, click start on the game and you are instantly thrown into this cell with no idea who you are or how you got here. So let's see if the game explains what's going on. So we can shout for help. Oh, the guard drops his key on the way out, so let's pick that up. So this is all a nice little introduction to how the interface works. Oh, so I've fallen underwater, so the first thing I need to do here is I need to wear the fish bowl that I picked up. I mean, the character movement side of the interface works reasonably well. You can click to move around, but if you actually hold the button, then your character will just move to wherever you move the pointer. It's the item manipulation side of things that is a little clunky. So you do have to time your attacks on this shark. Now there is actually a very important item in this room that you can miss, and it's actually hidden completely. If you go over to the right hand side here and stand behind the wall, click on pick up, you'll see that there's some seaweed. Now like I said in my original review, the mouse control is all well and good, but I actually find the joystick control to be a lot more user friendly. See, now according to the manual, this character that you control is called Brad, but you'll notice that the game itself has not actually told us this yet. So you just have to give the rocks to the rocksmith until they disappear off the board behind him. In this room here, there's not a lot you can do at this point. All you can do right now is pick up the plank, combine the plank and the rock so that you're
create a little seesaw, which you will need to use in a minute. And what has he given me in return? Ball of string. Oh, there was something glinting there, as you can see, little tiny object glinting. What is that? That is a coin. As you can see, there are 4 holes in the back wall on this one. If you look inside them, then a creature will fall out of one of the other ones. So go over to the one that the creature fell out of and look inside that one. You repeat it a couple more times, and then in the last hole you will notice some sticks. So pick up those sticks. And then returning to the seesaw that we made earlier, this is where we use the computer monitor that we just picked up. If you hadn't read the manual, you might actually be wondering, why is a computer monitor lying around in a fantasy world like this? But this is actually the world where all lost items from our world end up, which is all in the manual, in the story. There are many options that you could try here. You could try inserting into the hole. You could try pushing into the hole. Apparently, what you have to do is throw the string and magnet. And you throw that into the hole. And that now gives you the metal wire. Fortunately, this doesn't kill the creature. It just gets him to leave a bit of mud behind on the wire, which you can then pick up. Yep, no out of order sign on it now, and then throw your coin into the well. And somebody offers you wealth, love, or property. What you want to do here is you want to actually select the hard hat, because as you'll have heard on the few times that I've walked past here, there is a rockfall happening. So if you try to walk down here without a hard hat on, then you will get knocked out and die. So what we want to do is we want to wear the hard hat. I don't know how you could have worked that out without just trial and error, but yes, the cartoon animation in this is really, really good. He's very clumsy, so let's attack him with his own sword. And he drops some money. And this is where things start to get more non-linear. You can do this next bit in whatever order you want. The way I like to do it is I like to go to the mage's shop first. If you give the mage the money that you picked up, he will teleport you to somewhere else. So you need to make your way along this cliffside. This is where the point and click element of the game doesn't really work, and why joystick control is better. Because what you would expect to do in a point and click adventure is to sweep your mouse across the screen, and if there was an item that you could pick up, it would then highlight. But the only way that you get to find out if something can be picked up in this game is if you actually go and stand near it. So you have to know that they're there. As you can see, there's a man here who is covered in electricity. So what do you think you do here? You wear the rubber gloves. Costume shop, that's where I want to go. So it looks like Mr. Ben, as if by magic a shopkeeper appeared. Right, give him some money. What's he going to give me? Oh, is exactly like Mr. Ben. Give fish to Eskimo. This gives me a fishing rod. I think that's where I'm going to leave this playthrough. I'm not going to. So without further ado, let's get on to the summary and the re-review itself.
There's still much to like about Curse of Enchantia, and it's easy to see why I was taken in by its charms when I first played it. Even with the Amiga's restricted palette of just 32 colours, the backgrounds and animation are both excellent. It really is a shame that there was no A1200 version with more colours though. Unfortunately, all of the good is undermined a little by how it plays. Playing with a mouse is far more fiddly than it should be, and the way that you have to click to walk over to an object, then right click to bring up the menu, then left click again on the command, is nowhere near as intuitive as something developed by LucasArts or Revolution Software. It really does improve a lot if you switch those controls to joystick though. The biggest issue for me though is how little of the game's story you actually learn while playing. None of it is in the game itself, and is instead tucked away in the game's manual. There isn't even an animated intro showing how your character ended up in this world. Instead, when you start the game, you're just hanging upside down in a jail cell, with no explanation of who you are, how you got here, or where here even is. And as a consequence, it can be quite difficult to care. Thankfully, the puzzles themselves are fun to solve and execute, and your reward is usually another fantastic looking location or animation. This was just about enough to keep me playing. Here's where I'd rank Curse of Enchantia in the point-and-click adventure game Super League, and its lowly position is more of an indication of how good the games above it are than a slight on this one. Don't forget you can watch the full in-depth Super League video right here on the channel next Friday. I definitely wouldn't give it 94% today, and would instead drop the score to something more around 75. It's certainly frustrating and flawed, but there's more than enough here to make it worth playing. It's widely believed that Atari's Superman, released in 1978, was the first game to be based on a film, but it was actually just a game that happened to be released at the same time as Richard Donner's film and not an actual license. The first movie license was from Atari though, in the shape of 1982's Raiders of the Lost Ark, released just a few short months before E.T. ruined everything. The following year, both Star Wars and Tron were turned into successful arcade games, and I can remember the first time that I saw and played both on a family holiday. It was around this time that I got my first home console, the Atari 2600, and this allowed me to play both The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi Death Star battle from Parker Brothers over and over again. By the time I moved over to the Spectrum, movie licenses were commonplace. Rambo, Short Circuit, Highlander and Cobra were all games that I bought with my pocket money and enjoyed to varying degrees. They were all produced by Ocean Software, who would go on to become known as the kings of the movie license. Their version of RoboCop, partly based on the Data East arcade game but with added minigames between the levels, was released in 1987 and would go on to become the most successful game of the 1980s in the UK. It's actually a game that I bought twice. Once for the Spectrum on original release, and then again for the Atari ST when it came to the 16-bit computers the following year. Ocean's in-house development teams would continue to release successful games based on the likes of Rambo 3, Red Heat, Total Recall and Batman, the latter of which was even bundled with all brand new Amiga 500s. While it's safe to say that the quality of these games was not always great, there was still the occasional gem. I've already featured two of Ocean's best on the re-review, in the shape of RoboCop 3 and The Addams Family, and you can find links to those videos in the description. In 1990 they snapped up the rights to Steven Spielberg's eagerly awaited Hook, and got straight to work on the game. With the movie due for release in UK cinemas in April 1992, they had a very narrow window in order to get the game finished. The game was designed by Bobby Earl and Kevin Oxland, with background artwork provided by Martin McDonald. Between them, they had already clocked up an impressive back catalogue of games on their CVs. Earl had already been programmer on the likes of Total Recall, Navy Seals and Terminator 2. Oxland had provided graphics for Spellbound, Anarchy and Orc, whereas McDonald had previously provided the graphics for the Commodore 64 versions of Target Renegade, Rastan and Platoon. According to Earl, in an interview published in Amiga Power magazine, it was clear from reading the movie's script that a platform game, which was normally the go-to genre for movie licenses, was not going to cut it, so they set about making a graphic adventure instead. He was also keen to stress that we shouldn't be expecting it to be similar to the other pirate-themed adventure game that was doing the rounds at the time. You know the one I'm talking about. Both Earl and Oxland started independent developer Spiral House in 1999, specialising in converting games and providing artwork for others. They've worked with a number of well-known developers including Reflections, Bizarre Creations and Bandai Namco on games such as Stuntman, Motorstorm, the Xbox version of Goat Simulator, the PC version of Blur, and one of my personal favourites, Lumo for the Nintendo Switch. Now it's time to see what I thought about Hook when I first played it, as we check out my original review. My exclusive review of Hook appeared in issue 48 of Games X from April 1992. It received a 2-page review, but had to share the Game of the Week accolade with Myth from System 3. There were no other Amiga games reviewed in the issue, but it did feature the final part of my player's guide for Psygnosis' Barbarian 2. This was the final ever issue of Games X, and there were lots of pictures dotted around the pages of the magazine of the staff looking glum. However, it wasn't long before myself and the rest of the production team moved over to GB Action, the UK's first magazine dedicated to Game Boy games, just over a month later. I was full of praise for Hook's visuals, saying that the backgrounds were incredibly well drawn and full of lots of little incidental animations that brought them to life. I also felt that the game was a refreshing change of pace from the usual movie licenses from Ocean. This is one of the best film conversions Ocean has done for a long time. It comes across as a startling achievement not to be missed. I awarded it 5 out of 5 overall, with both presentation and lastability earning 18 out of 20, with gameplay 19 out of 20. Here's how that score compares to the ones in other Amiga magazines that month. Now though, it's time for the playtest. Let's see how the game stands up today.
Now, it was pretty common in the early 90s for Amiga games to use up one of their discs with an intro sequence, and this was no exception. This was, however, one of the games that did allow you to boot the game by putting the second disc in, so that's always a bonus. And so this is where the game begins. You find yourself in Pirate Square, and it's your typical point-and-click adventure game. You've got 5 different things that you can click on at the bottom to do various side things, so you can look. So it looks like a menacing crocodile. Got speak, pick up, open your inventory and give. I mean, the backgrounds in this game are definitely better than we used to get in the likes of the Sierra Online games on the Amiga, which were always really bad conversions from the PC. Right, let's talk to this guy. Okay, so he's not going to let me past unless I look like a pirate, because I'm currently wearing my business clothes. See, the talking interface is not quite as good as it was in something from LucasArts. You can click the right button to cycle through your different options. Oh, only 9 gold pieces for a magnet. Maybe that's what I can get from him. I know there's I know you can pick up that anchor down here. That's not entirely obvious. Would be better if the game did actually highlight items as you moved over them. That is actually Tinkerbell that's swinging around my head. You can actually ask her for hints at various points if you do get stuck. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think there are any puzzles in this game that many people will get stuck on. Yeah, that rope that I just picked up, let's combine that with the anchor. I do like the way that Captain Hook gets angry whenever you do something right. And the idea here is that you have to get the hat off that guy. So you have to time your swing across. Yeah, that got it. Yeah, brilliant. But what I actually needed to do before swinging back across was knock on the door to distract the lady so I can go and steal that coat off her washing line. That should now allow me to get that. Yes. So I now have a hat and a jacket. Now the only thing I need is a pair of pants. Now this is where you would find out whether or not the copy of the game that you are playing had actually been pirated or not, because this mug here on the right hand side would not be here if you were playing a copied version of the game. Like a lot of movie licenses, the characters in this don't actually look anything like the actors who played them in the film. So you can actually sell 2 gold teeth to get 2 coins. So I'll do that. I'll do that again. You have to buy 3 mugs of cocoa off him. Apparently, the developers did originally have this as 3 mugs of beer, but they decided that with the game being aimed at a younger audience, that beer was probably not the option. Then I give the cocoa to this guy who's sat by the bar here, because if you give him 3 mugs of cocoa, he falls asleep. But fortunately, I should now be able to get on Hook's ship, now that I am dressed as a pirate. Must say that the character animation is not quite as good when you're in pirate get-up. Now there is something going on to the left, but you can't get past the crowd to be able to see it. See, that's Peter's children hanging in the net there. But at the moment you can't get that way, so let's go all the way over here. And that's picked me up. How many gold coins was that? Oh look, 9 gold pieces. The exact amount that needed to go and buy a metal detector. And then there is an X on the beach right there. We use the magnet with that. We find an alarm clock. You see the ticking of the clock has given me away. Yeah, so the next part of the game is going to be getting Peter to remember who he was. There's definitely a decent level of polish to this game overall. I don't know if it was the limited development time that they had, but the game does seem very slight. There's not an awful lot to it. I mean, it's got bags of charm, and the graphics are nice. But I think we're only half an hour in to this playing this here, and I'm already over halfway through the game. Let's talk to that guy. Talk to him again. See how I get some elastic. I have to keep jumping off here and ask him what he thinks of it each time. And I think after you've done it 3 times, he'll tell you to go and try the slingshot instead. And look, all the imaginary food has now appeared because Peter is now using his imagination correctly. So literally all that's left now is to go and confront Captain Hook and end the game. And the picture in the right hand corner of the screen has turned into Peter Pan now. And basically you just have to select the right response. And if this isn't insult sword fighting, I don't know what is. And that's literally it. So, a game that looks great, definitely, but it's a shame that it's so short. But now that we've gone through that playtest, let's get on with the re-review and give it a score and sum up my feelings.
Much like the film that it's based on, there's a lot to like about Hook the game, even if it doesn't quite reach its full potential. It's well made, has some interesting ideas, and looks great, but it doesn't come together to form a satisfying whole. The game's interface works well, but it's clear from the limited number of options available that the game was aimed at a younger demographic than most adventure games. This applies to the puzzles as well, which, despite being enjoyable to solve, will be unlikely to tax most seasoned players. The main issue, however, is the game's overall length. The film is just over 2 hours, and the fact that you can complete the game in less time tells you all you really need to know about it. The opening section in the town is perfectly fine, and by far the best part of the game, but as soon as you encounter the Lost Boys, it all feels a little bit rushed, especially the final confrontation. It was definitely the right decision by the designers to make something other than a platform game, as this helps the game to stand out. If, however, they didn't want us to be comparing it to Monkey Island, perhaps they shouldn't have included a bit where we sword fight with Captain Hook while hurling insults at each other. When I did the Retro Game Super League video for Point and Click Adventures, Hook found itself languishing in the bottom half. In the Super League of movie games, however, it finds itself just outside the top 10. What that tells you about the state of movie licenses, I'll let you decide. Hook is definitely worth playing, especially if you are a fan of the film, but it's definitely not a 5-star experience by any stretch. The quality of the presentation and the overall charm, however, would mean that I would score it 7 out of 10 today. When I was growing up and playing games in the 1980s, yes, I'm that old, there was only one name in graphic adventures, and that was Sierra Online. I had tried playing various text adventures from both Infocom and Magnetic Scrolls when I had a Spectrum, but none of them ever really grabbed me. The first game to truly get my full attention was the original Police Quest, which I had played on the Atari ST. Sierra were founded in 1980 as Online Systems by husband and wife Ken and Roberta Williams. Together they created the world's first graphic adventure, Mystery House, which was heavily inspired by the works of both Agatha Christie and the board game Cluedo. They were originally based in Los Angeles before relocating to a small town closer to the Sierra Nevada. The company's name was changed to Sierra Online in 1984, and it was around this time that the first game in what is arguably their most popular series was released. King's Quest, Quest for the Crown, introduced animated characters into the games for the first time and was, understandably, a smash hit. It led to numerous sequels, a 1990 remake, and a full reboot on Xbox Live Arcade and PSN in 2015. The Sierra name quickly became synonymous with game titles that ended with the word Quest. In addition to the 8 installments of the King's Quest series, there was also Space Quest, which ran for 6 episodes, Quest for Glory, which managed 5, and then the Police Quest series. The first game, subtitled In Pursuit of the Death Angel, was designed by former Highway Patrol officer Jim Walls. It aimed to tell the story of the hunt for a serial killer in a realistic manner. Players were required to follow police procedure to the letter as they went on patrol around the streets of the fictional city of Lytton. Police Quest 2 The Vengeance arrived on the Amiga in 1989 and was praised for a much better story where the villain from the first game escaped from prison and went on a murderous rampage, as well as vastly improved graphics. Before the third game arrived, Walls would also write and design the espionage adventure codename Iceman, also for Sierra, although sadly Police Quest 3 would end up being his final game in the franchise. The fourth game, Police Quest Open Season, was written by novelist Darrell F. Gates and featured both a new setting and protagonist. It went on to become the basis for the SWAT games, which were a series of tactical shooters that Sierra published in the late 90s. This was a difficult time for Sierra, with troubled takeovers and corporate restructuring, but they still managed to publish some great games. Among them was Relic Entertainment's Homeworld and an expansion pack for Diablo entitled Hellfire. They were also the publisher that brought Valve's Half-Life to the world in 1998, and let's face it, the entire gaming world should be grateful for that. The Sierra name would continue as publisher only from 1999 onwards, as part of Vivendi Universal Games, the company behind both the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon franchises. Following Vivendi's sale to Activision in 2008, however, Sierra were closed down. Then, out of nowhere, Activision relaunched the label in 2014 to publish indie games on both the PC and consoles. The first two games that were announced were a reboot of King's Quest from developer The Odd Gentleman and Geometry Wars 3 Dimensions. The revival was short-lived, however, and there haven't been any games published by the company since the 5th episode of King's Quest arrived in 2016. Now, let's take a look back at my original review of Police Quest and see what I said about it. My review of Police Quest 3 appeared in issue 31 of Games X from November 1991. This was the same issue as my first Samurai review, which I covered on this series way back in episode 4. It was also one of my busiest weeks, as I also reviewed Riders of Rohan, Home Alone, and another adventure game from Sierra, Leisure Suit Larry 5. As we were a multi-format magazine, my review covered both the PC and Amiga versions of the game, even though the Amiga version wasn't due for release for another couple of months. I stated right off the bat that I had been a massive fan of the previous two games in the series, and that I considered Police Quest 3 to be the best one yet. I found that both the atmosphere and attention to detail were astounding. I was full of praise for the game's soundtrack too, which was composed by Jan Hammer, most well known for Miami Vice at the time. In gameplay terms, I said there would be no difference between the two versions of the game, although the Amiga version would be a definite downgrade in the graphics department. The game will still be just as great as the PC version, and all Amiga-owning adventurers should snatch up a copy as soon as it appears. It was awarded 5 X's out of 5 and an X-rated award, and I stated that it was easily one of the best adventure games that I had played. Gameplay, lastability and presentation all received 18 out of 20. Here's how my score compares to the ones from other magazines. Now let's play the game again and see if any of what I said is still relevant today. It's time for the playtest.
Here we are once again taking on the role of Detective Sonny Bonds. Although as this game begins, he is actually now Detective Sergeant Sonny Bonds. And one of the first things that you're going to want to do on this game, because as you can see when he walks over here, it's all a bit slow. But fortunately, Sierra have put in the option to increase the game speed. So you're going to want to go over here and put this slider all the way to the top. By the time this game came out, Sierra had made the full transition to point and click, so which is why you now have this mouse pointer that you can move around to look at things rather than have to type in your commands. In your inbox here is a notification that you need to read. So basically, there is an officer, Pat Morales, who you need to speak to about a complaint that's been raised against her. That little notification noise that you heard then is the game's score increasing, because up here you will notice there is a score, just like in all previous Sierra games. So that is my first point. I must say that there's a lot of wandering around the police station at the start of this game. This is not really the best way to start the game. Also, with the reduction of colours from 256 to 32, there's Pat Morales in the middle. I don't know who made the decision to have the floor be the exact same shade of blue as your police uniform. And it does strike me that this Amiga version of the game is a little bit of a lazy conversion. But then the same thing could be said about a lot of the Sierra games at the same time. All the remakes of Leisure Suit Larry, King's Quest and Space Quest all came out around the same time as this. What you're not getting a feel of on this edited version of the playtest is just how slow everything is. That literally took me 3 minutes to walk from the briefing room back to my office again. So it seems like she definitely did do what she's what the complaint is about. So I'm going to sustain. You conclude that disciplinary action is necessary. Sustain the complaint. So. I mean, all of these loading pauses are pretty horrendous. Would have been even worse if he was playing it off a floppy, but this hard drive installation is still pretty bad. Now, Sonny's locker is this one in the middle here, I believe. Yep, that's my locker. Click on it to open it. He wrote it down on the inside cover of his police manual. Now, what he's actually referring to there is the manual that came packaged with the game. And lo and behold, if you open the package of that manual, which I have downloaded so that I can play this, you'll see the number 776. Because the game does come with a pretty big manual, full of police procedure and radio codes and things like that. And you will need them throughout the game. So if I take that requisition card up to the top floor, I should be able to get my computer access card. Oh, Sonny Bonds, please call dispatch. Actually, I'll ignore what I just said, and I'll try and do that. Now, if you want an example of how the game makes you jump through hoops in order to do just a simple thing. So there's my phone for me to call dispatch. First, you have to click on it so that it'll sit down. You then actually have to click on the receiver to pick up the phone, and then click the dispatch button. Why I can't just click on the phone and have it do all that for me, I don't know. Okay, both of these cars are actually mine, but as I am in uniform and on patrol, I want to take the actual police car, and not the unmarked one. Okay, so yeah, so what you get once you're in the patrol car is this little driving minigame. You got all your computers and everything. There's a little red button here to turn your sirens on. Currently says I'm doing 25 miles an hour southbound on 6th Street, which is where, yep. So I want to keep going south until I get to River Street. So let's accelerate a little bit. Once again, any potential fun that you could be having at this point is mitigated by how slow everything is. Right, so here we go, River Street. Now there is actually a stop sign, I believe, here, and obviously being a policeman, I'm not allowed to go through that. The game will punish me for doing so. Right, go past Wall Street, and then I will need to stop, because then I'll be at Aspen Falls. Well, that was much more fiddly than it should have been, so what I'm actually going to do first and foremost here is, because I'm playing this on the A500 Mini, I am going to save my game. A man who's almost butt naked. Okay, ranting and raving about aliens. There's many ways that you can fail this fairly simple exercise that I'm about to do here. So he steals my police badge and throws it in the river. So I search his clothes. I've got his set of keys and a driver's license. So if I take his keys, I can throw those in the river. But naturally, as you would imagine, this is gonna make him angry. And then what I need to do quickly, if the game will let me do anything quickly, is get my nightstick out. And then the one other thing that I'm going to have to remember to do before I put him back in the police car is very, very important. What I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to search him again. And we discover a knife concealed in his briefs. Now, if I didn't do that, he would use that knife and kill me before I get back to the police station, because obviously being a Sierra adventure game, it is possible to die. And then this is once again going to take me back into the driving minigame, but I'll spare you watching that. As you can see elements of games like LA Noire in the way that this game that game works was inspired by this. The way that you go out and solve cases and then have to drive back to the station and interact with fellow policemen. Just that this is not really the best version of this game. Right, so what you need to do is you need to take him into the booking office and book him, but before you do that, because you have to follow police procedure, you're going to have to open a locker and put your gun in it, because you can't go in there with your gun. And what are we booking him for? So once again, you have to dig out your manual and go through all the different booking codes that it could be. So violation code, look down the list. There is one for not in full control of faculties, which is 05150. So that's probably as good a place as any to end this playtest and move on to the final summary. Don't think the Amiga version is the best demonstration of how good this game can be.
There's no point beating around the bush here. Police Quest 3 on the Amiga is not a very good game at all. On the VGA original on the PC, the characters and backgrounds looked great in 256 colours, but condensing that down to just 32 has resulted in some truly shocking visuals. It's almost as if they just scanned everything into the Amiga and then didn't polish it up in any way. And let's face it, that's probably exactly what they did. The actual gameplay interface works a lot better in this game than in most other Sierra games released around the same time. I also really appreciated the option to change the game's speed, as the character's default walking speed is painfully slow. It's a shame because I know from experience that the game's overarching story is a really good one. You'll just really struggle to find out for yourself. There's simply too much faff that gets in the way. You could simply spend your first hour of gameplay getting lost and bored wandering around the police station. Unfortunately, the driving minigame stops being fun after about 2 minutes, and overall it's far too easy to completely fail at a task and have to restart the entire game. If you are going to play it, I would strongly recommend that you utilise the A500 Mini's save states if you're going to get any enjoyment out of it whatsoever. As you can see from the Mini Super League, Sierra released a lot of games on the Amiga, and they're a real mixed bag in terms of quality. Some of them also haven't aged particularly well, and sadly Police Quest 3 is one of them. If you can put up with the sheer laziness of the Amiga conversion, there is a great story here, and that just about elevates the score a little. I still can't give it any higher than 4 out of 10 though. Cyberdreams may have been a new name in gaming in 1992 when Darkseed arrived on the PC, but the people behind the name certainly weren't. It was founded in 1990 by Patrick Ketchum and Rolf Klug, with the aim of producing games in collaboration with some of the biggest names in fantasy, science fiction and horror. Prior to Cyberdreams, Ketchum had spent the 1980s in charge of Datasoft, a company which he had founded in 1980 with a small team of just 15 programmers. They had produced games for the Apple II, Commodore 64 and various Atari systems, with their output consisting mainly of licensed titles such as The Goonies and Bruce Lee, and a number of arcade conversions. As far as Amiga games were concerned, they were the North American publisher for Tech Software's Terramex, which was retitled Cosmic Relief for the US market. They also produced a number of text adventures and a strategy game based on the Tom Clancy novel The Hunt for Red October. At the end of the 80s, Ketchum spent a brief time working at Sullivan Bluth on the home computer versions of both Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. Shortly after setting up Cyberdreams, they approached H.R. Geiger, the artist more well known for creating the Xenomorph in the Alien franchise, about providing artwork for a new game. Geiger only agreed if the developers would use high-resolution graphics, as he didn't like the 320 by 200 pixels that was the VGA standard at the time. After selecting the art that they were going to use for the game, it took the artists 6 months to add colour to the backgrounds, and then digitised actors were used for the characters that would populate the town. For the central character of Mike Dawson, the game's designer simply put himself into the game and even used his own name. The game sold well enough to warrant a 1995 sequel and was nominated for multiple awards. In October 2006, the now defunct Game Trailers website even placed it at number 7 on their list of the scariest games ever made. The games that it beat included Clock Tower, Eternal Darkness and System Shock 2. Their next game was the futuristic racing game Cyber Race, which featured vehicles from legendary Blade Runner artist Sid Mead. As well as the Darkseed sequel in 1995, they also collaborated with author Harlan Ellison for the adventure game I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. That game was a critical success, but a disappointing commercial flop. A proposed PlayStation version was cancelled as a result. After not being available for many years, it was picked up in 2013 by remaster specialists Night Dive Studios, and that led to the game being re-released on both GOG and Steam. Following a change in management at the company, Ketchum sold off his 50% stake and left to pursue a career as a photographer instead. Following his departure, Cyberdreams would only release one more game, the poorly received Noir, a Shadowy Thriller, in 1997. Proposed collaborations with Dungeons & Dragons creator Gary Gygax and horror maestro Wes Craven were announced, and in some cases demos even shown, but the games were never finished or released. 2 other games that Cyberdreams had worked on, Blue Heat and Ares Rising, were completed and released by other studios. Now it's time to see what the magazines had to say about Darkseed when they reviewed it back in 1993. Six reviews of the Amiga version of Darkseed were published between February and March 1993, for an average score of 84%. Amiga Action had the game on the cover, and the one Amiga even gave away a pretty substantial playable demo on their cover disc. The highest score that it received was 95% from Ben Stiles at Amiga Computing, who was blown away by the game's art and story. His only issue with the game was the use of high-res graphics, which meant that it flickered on some displays and consequently made a lot of the text hard to read. The lowest score that it received was 72% from Amiga format. Neil Jackson was also impressed with the visuals, but criticised the time-reliant gameplay and confusing way that the plot unfolds. He did, however, still recommend it if you were a horror fan. For the CD32 release in 1994, the game was reviewed again by most magazines. This time, from 5 reviews, the average was just 75%. Amiga Power gave it 63%, which was quite a drop from their original 88% that they had given it first time around. Reviewer Jonathan Nash stated that it was a good attempt at making something different, but that the gameplay was overly picky, punishing you for solving puzzles on the incorrect day in some cases, and that the overall adventure itself was too linear. Even Amiga Computing lowered their incredibly enthusiastic score from the original review to just 70%, saying that there was just too much slow plodding around from one location to another. Now I'm going to play the game again for myself and see how it stacks up today. It's time for the playtest.
Okay, I am actually playing the CD32 version here, so this should be fully voiced.
That sure was some nightmare. It even left me with a monster headache.
So the downside to playing with the CD32 version is that I have to control the pointer with a joypad rather than a mouse. So first thing you have to do is clear the character's headache, which is done by getting the pills from the bathroom cabinet. I do like the interface that this game has, because you have a choice between an arrow, a hand, or a question mark, and when you move over specific items, that will change to let you know that you can interact with it. So that question mark changes to an exclamation mark.
Old trench coat. I wouldn't be caught dead in that thing.
Don't know if it's vanity or laziness that led the game's designer to put himself in the game. Because designer Mike Dawson is even who voices the character here as well. I think it's the room on the left that I need to go to here. So that shows that there is a secret room off to the side of the study. So I am in the study, so that must mean I need to push this wall here. Character movement could definitely be quicker than it is, I think. Let's push the chest out of the way, because I think there's something under it. I don't see why you have to push the chest 3 times to get it out of the way. It's, I suppose, in the same way that I had to investigate the coat 3 times in order to find the library ticket in the pocket.
A tremendous view of the town from up here. But the wooden railing looks as though it has seen better days.
If you're playing this on the Amiga 500, you can either press the T key, or on the CD32, press the left button on the controller, and that advances time a little bit. There you go, I just advanced time because I knew that the postman would be coming. Gives me a creepy baby doll. There is definitely a very creepy atmosphere that the game manages to create.
Out here. My house seems somehow out of time, a relic of a dark past, or perhaps a dark future.
Although it must be said that this piece of music that's playing now doesn't really fit with the atmosphere of the rest of it. I think the next thing that I'm waiting for is the phone to start ringing in the house. But I'm not exactly sure what time that happens. I don't think there's anything particularly brain-taxing about any of the puzzles in this game. It's all a lot of busy work. There's never any moment where you feel clever for having solved something. Let's have a look at the Geiger painting on the wall, shall we?
A masterpiece of the macabre. Its eyes follow me relentlessly.
Oh, no, I don't even need to wait. The phone is ringing now. Let's go and get it.
Hello?
Hello, Mike. This is Sue at the library. We have a book on hold for you, so please stop by sometime.
Right, so let's head to the library then. As good as all the background art is on this game, it really is a shame that they didn't take the opportunity on the A1200 version to add more colour to it. Right, so let's give the library ticket to the librarian. Which one's the library ticket?
This card really should be kept with the book. You'll find that one in aisle C. It's the one with the green cover.
The one with the green cover. You mean to tell me there's only one book with the green cover in aisle C?
Sure is quiet here. You could hear
It's
a pin drop.
It's a library, of course it is.
The rows of books in the library stacks all look pretty much the same.
No, there's 2 books with a green... I mean, why does he walk so slowly on this screen? I just don't get it. I think this game came out at a time when adventure gaming was at its peak and I was really starting to get into it. Obviously, I just had Monkey Island 2 and Police Quest. So I do remember that I bought this game as soon as it came out. And I did get a little bit frustrated with the fact that I kept having to restart the game due to errors that I'd made. One error in particular I remember actually required me to restart the game all the way from the beginning because a save game wasn't good enough. I think this might be the last thing that I have to do on day 1. The game actually takes place over the course of 3 days. So I think using the key on the clock is the last thing that I have to do today. Just remember that name to John McKeegan. Unfortunately, there is no way to carry on with the game from here without going to sleep first, because you can't travel over to the dark world without getting the item the postman delivers the next morning. It is now 8 PM on day 1. I wonder if it will let me go to bed. And another nightmare. to press time pass twice for the postman to arrive. Here we go. Found this broken shard from the mirror. There we go. So if I reattach that to the mirror, I'll be able to transfer myself to the dark world.
An unnatural glow emanates from the chamber. Strange machines provide energy, nourishing the creatures cocooned in their sack.
So every room in the real world is replicated in the dark world.
These look like the plans for a gruesome biological experiment on a human.
Yes, I wonder who that human is. That's the gloves, okay. And then use this lever over here with the gloves. I will die from being electrocuted if I don't wear the gloves.
This is the outside of the alien edifice. It reminds me somewhat of the front of my own house.
I don't see how, it looks completely different. See, now this is what I said earlier about the number of colours meaning that items are not visible. Somewhere in this room, there is a shovel that you can pick up. Would you like to guess where it is? Yes, it's here. So I now want to take that shovel that I've just picked up and head to the cemetery in the real world and dig up the grave of Mr. McKeegan. I mean, I can definitely see why reviews raved about this game so much when it was originally released. But I can also see that it doesn't seem to have aged particularly well. With the number of games that came out around this time that have received remakes in recent years, it would be interesting if this game got one. Now, I knew exactly which grave I was heading for there. There's another diary page. Let's have a read. Now, a lot of these gravestones are actually a couple of little in-jokes.
G. Threepwood, rest in peace.
See, G. Threepwood, R.I.P.
Come here, Dawson. I want a word with you.
So, you know, unfortunately, last time I checked, digging up a grave wasn't entirely legal.
You're under arrest, Mr. Dawson. Come with me.
So this is where I find myself thrown in a jail cell, and that's probably as good a place as any to end the playtest. Let's just say that the get out of jail free card that you got earlier comes into play here. So let's move on to the summary, and I'll give it my overall thoughts and give the game a score.
I still find that there's a lot to admire in Darkseed. The presentation does a great job of creating an atmosphere of unease, and getting H.R. Geiger to provide the artwork was a masterstroke. It's a shame that for the AGA version they didn't utilise the larger colour palette, as it can occasionally be difficult to see some of the items on screen. The control interface is also incredibly easy to use, whether you're playing with a mouse on the A500 or a joypad on the CD32. However, I'm not a fan of the constantly ticking clock, as there are many occasions where you can simply stand around waiting for something to happen. Also, you can easily miss critical events, the problem there being that you have no idea that you've missed them and that it's now rendered the game unbeatable. I get that this was a way to add replayability to the game, which is something missing from the majority of games in the adventure genre. It gives you things that you can discover on a second playthrough, but having to restart from the beginning is annoying, especially when you can't skip any of the animation sequences that you've already seen. Worse still, there are no eureka moments at all in the adventure. Almost all of the items are used exactly where you would expect them to use. Would it have killed the designers to label one of the keys in the game as a small key rather than a clock key, as there is actually only one clock in the game, so it's pretty obvious where you have to use it. Horror is not a particularly well served genre on the Amiga, and Darkseed does sit quite high in the Mini Super League. However, I would recommend that you check out the games that are above it before you play this one. Ultimately, I think even though it can be annoying at times, there's enough that's good about it to make it worth playing, and that's why I'm going to give it 7 out of 10.